Hey there. Tonight we are stepping into a winter so cold that the air itself seems to bite first and ask questions later. You are standing at the edge of a medieval English village, and almost at once you can feel the truth of the night settling around you. Frost grips every thatched roof. Icicles cling to dark beams like little glass teeth. The paths are stiff with snow, and somewhere ahead, behind warped shutters and weak walls, families are preparing to sleep in a world that has no central heating, no radiator humming in the background, no reassuring click of a thermostat. Just fire, cloth, a beat, and the quiet stubbornness of people who refuse to freeze. If you enjoy these slow journeys with me, you can like the video and subscribe. It really does help keep the fire going around here. Now let the room grow dim. Unclench your jaw. Let your shoulders loosen. Breathe in slowly, and then breathe out even more slowly, and feel yourself walking with me into the cold. The first thing that strikes you is the sound. Winter changes sound. I have always found that strange, and a little beautiful. In warm weather, a village feels porous. Noise drifts and blends and wanders off into hedges and fields. Here, in this hard medieval winter, every small sound arrives clean and separate. The crunch of your boots on packed snow, the faint creak of a sign hanging outside a cottage, the little rattle of shutters against timber, a distant dog barking once, then deciding the effort is not worth it. Even your own breathing seems louder than usual, as if the cold has polished the air into glass. The second thing is the smell. Wood smoke slips through the village lanes in thin gray ribbons. It moves slowly, caught under the low pressure of the frozen night, drifting past crooked cottages and little animal pens. You can smell damp wool too, and old straw, and the faint mineral scent of frozen earth. Nothing in this place is excessive. Even warmth feels rationed. You move deeper into the village, and the light fades quickly. Medieval winter evenings did that. The sun left early, and it did not apologize. By the time most work was done, darkness had already settled over the settlement like a lid. It is one reason sleep mattered so much. People did not simply go to bed because they were tired. They went because winter narrowed the useful day, and because staying awake in a freezing room with no real source of heat was a poor bargain. Ahead of you stands a small peasant cottage. Its walls lean very slightly, like a tired person who has been standing too long. The roof is thick with frost. A tiny square of window glows from within, not brightly, just enough to suggest life. You pause at the threshold and feel that old human hesitation, the small awareness that crossing from cold into shelter can feel almost sacred when the night is this bitter. Inside, the warmth is real, but weak. That is important. It is not the generous warmth of a modern home. It does not wrap around you all at once. It brushes one side of your face and leaves the other cool. A smoky hearth smolders at the center of the room, giving off more promise than power. A pot hangs nearby, and whatever is inside smells earthy and thick. Root vegetables, oats, maybe a little fat if the family has been fortunate, maybe not if winter has already taken too much. The family moves carefully. You notice that right away. Nobody rushes. Nobody throws the door wide open and lets the cold come flooding in. Every motion is measured. A woman lifts the lid of the pot only long enough to stir. A man reaches for another log, then hesitates, weighing cost against comfort in the space of a breath. A child edges closer to the fire and holds out both hands, then pulls them back when the smoke thickens. All of it feels practiced, almost ritualistic. There is a historical reason for that quiet caution. By the late Middle Ages, several regions of England faced serious pressure on woodland resources. Fuel could be scarce and expensive, especially in heavily settled areas. Firewood was not just firewood. It was time, labor, trade, and survival in one rough bundle. When you burn a log in this cottage, you are not merely making yourself comfortable. You are shortening tomorrow. You stand near the hearth and let your fingers hover over the heat. It is enough to remind your skin what warmth feels like, but not enough to let you forget the cold beyond the walls. The family is eating now, bowls held close to the body to trap every bit of rising steam. Honestly, it is hard not to admire the practicality of it. In modern life, we spend money on fancy ceramic mugs that promise thermal performance. Here, a medieval villager simply cups a rough bowl in both hands and thanks it for being warm. You glance down and notice a small bundle tucked near the hearthstone, wrapped in cloth, tied with twine, oddly precious in its placement. When the firelight catches it, you can make out little dried fragments inside, perhaps herbs, perhaps scraps of leather, perhaps one of those peculiar household charms that blend practicality with belief. The source script mentioned little winter talismans, tokens or odd things tucked into pockets and bedding to guard against the cold. That feels entirely believable here. When the night is long and the room is drafty and your child is coughing in the dark, you take comfort where you can find it. Even if that comfort is a dried frog skin, or a carved bit of wood, or a whispered saying passed down from your grandmother, who would have absolutely insisted that winter listens if you speak to it politely. Now the evening begins its slow turn toward sleep. This is where the heart of the routine reveals itself. The family gathers around the hearth, not to build the fire higher, but to prepare it for burial. They are banking the fire. The woman takes a wooden tool and drags ash carefully over the glowing coals. The man nudges half-burned wood into a tighter cluster. Nobody speaks loudly. There is a mild tension in the air, because this small mound of hidden heat may decide what the morning feels like. If the coals survive, someone can coax the fire back to life at dawn with less effort. If they die, the family wakes to a dead hearth, cold hands, and the slow frustration of striking sparks with flint and steel while the room turns their breath white. Historians debate the exact tools used in some rural households for this task. Written records are uneven. Some may have used paddles, some rags, some whatever came to hand. But the principle is clear enough. Fire was put to sleep with care, because everyone in the room depended on its memory. The father leans in to test the heat with the back of his hand. The mother smooths the ash one last time. A child watches with the solemn concentration children often bring to the things adults care about most. I have always liked that detail. It tells you what matters in a household. If the adults fall silent when they bank the fire, The children understand that this ash-covered glow is not just part of the room. It is part of life itself. You step back and take in the rest of the cottage. The walls are wattle and daub, woven wood coated with a mixture of mud, clay, straw, and small stones. In daylight, it might look almost rustic, even charming to a modern eye. At night, in deep winter, it looks like what it is, a thin and imperfect barrier between warm bodies and lethal weather. Moss has been stuffed into gaps. Strips of old cloth have been pressed into seams. One corner shows a rough patch of newer clay where the last storm must have opened a draft. The repairs are visible everywhere. Nothing here is decorative. Everything is tactical. You run your fingers near one beam and feel the faintest current of cold air slipping through a seam. It is a small thing, but in a room like this, small things accumulate. A finger of draft at the wall, a loose shutter, a worn blanket, a fire a little too low. That is how winter enters a house. Not heroically, not with a dramatic crash, but in patient increments. The floor is covered with old rushes, and the smell rising from them is part straw, part earth, part age. There is smoke in the room, too, and wool, and the sour trace of damp clothing drying too slowly. None of it is pleasant in the modern sense, yet none of it feels unbearable. It smells lived in, protected, shared. The cold does that. It pushes people, tools, bedding, food, and breath closer together until a room becomes less like a room and more like an ecosystem. One of the children begins to yawn. Another is already pulling a rough wool layer around his shoulders. The family does not head off to separate heated bedrooms. There are no glowing hallways, no soft lamps in every chamber. Sleep will happen here, close to the hearth, close to one another, close to whatever heat remains. That simple reality changes the emotional texture of the night. Sleep is not private. It is communal, strategic, and quietly vulnerable. Before they settle fully, the mother adjusts the shutters. She closes them tight, then hangs cloth over the inside to slow the draft. That gesture matters. Darkness itself becomes part of the insulation. Once the openings are sealed and the candle is pinched low, the room becomes a closed pocket of breath and fabric and stored heat. It reminds you that medieval people did not wait for comfort to appear. They assembled it, one layer at a time, like people mending a boat in rough water. The last visible flame in the hearth disappears now beneath the ash. Only a faint redness survives under the surface. It looks almost shy. The room dims. Your eyes adjust. You can hear little things more clearly now. Someone coughs softly. A spoon is set down. A floorboard gives a tired little complaint. Outside, the wind reaches around the cottage and tests the shutters. The sound is thin and curious, almost like fingers on a drum. You take a long, slow breath and feel what the villagers feel. Not safety, exactly. Something more modest than that. Managed risk. That may be the real secret of medieval winter sleep. People did not defeat the cold. They negotiated with it. They made just enough warmth, just enough shelter, just enough and trusted those small defenses to hold until dawn. In another corner of the room, blankets are being shaken out. Straw bedding is pulled closer to the warmest patch of floor. A dog circles twice before collapsing in a heap that looks wiser than most human decisions. Somewhere in the house, a baby stirs, then settles again. The rhythm of the night has begun. And as the family lies down around the weak but precious memory of the hearth, you realize the lesson of this first cottage is already larger than fire. Sleep here is built from caution, from scarcity, from closeness, from little acts performed so often they no longer look remarkable. Yet, each one matters. The banked ash, the patched wall, the thick pottage, the closed shutter, the wool against skin, the body curled toward another body. You stay only a little longer, long enough to feel the room grow quieter, long enough to see the last ember pulse faintly under its blanket of ash. And then you slip back outside into the frozen dark, where the village waits with more answers, and the cold closes around you again like a patient hand. Outside, the lane feels even colder after the cottage air, because even weak warmth makes honest cold feel personal. Snow presses hard beneath your boots. The stars above are sharp and remote. You pass another house and notice how little light escapes it. People learned quickly that open light meant open draft. So every glow is hidden behind wood and cloth and caution, as if the whole village is trying to sleep without being noticed by winter. A shutter knocks once in the wind. Somewhere near a shed, an animal shifts in straw. The sound is strangely comforting. It reminds you that the whole settlement is doing the same quiet work. Humans, dogs, hens, cattle, all of them breathing, conserving heat, waiting for dawn. You look back at the first cottage. From the outside, it seems fragile enough to fail under a hard season. Yet inside it holds a family, a meal, a banked fire, and the practiced patience needed to last one more night. That thought stays with you as you move on. Heat is never a single thing here. It is not only the hearth. It is repair. It is food. It is breath. It is routine. It is the body learned by long winters to waste less, speak softer, and sleep close to what little warmth exists. The cold wastes no time reminding you who is in charge. The moment you leave the first cottage behind, the night clamps onto your face and hands again, and for a second your breath catches in your throat. That is another winter lesson. Heat disappears quickly. You can borrow it for a moment, but you cannot trust it to follow you outdoors. You move along a narrow footpath between cottages, and the snow gives a dry, compact sound beneath your boots. Above you, the sky is wonderfully clear, in the merciless way winter skies often are. Every star seems sharpened. Every roofline glitters. Frost turns the village into something almost delicate, though nothing about the experience is gentle. Your eyelashes stiffen slightly when you blink, and a little curl of white breath drifts back over your shoulder. The next cottage you enter feels similar to the first, but not identical. That matters too. Medieval life was full of repetition, but never perfect repetition. Here the hearth is lower, the embers redder, the room perhaps a little more crowded, the smell a little stronger. A woman kneels by the fire with a long iron poker, pushing ash around the coals in slow, deliberate motions. She seems like someone practicing competence, which may be the most valuable winter skill of all. Fire is the center of the room, not only because it gives heat, but because everything orbits it. Bedding is arranged in relation to it. Supper happens around it. Clothing dries near it. Hands extend toward it. Worries gather around it too. If the embers survive, morning begins with some mercy. If they fail, the whole household starts the day behind. There is a practical reason people guarded embers so carefully. Matches did not exist. A new flame meant flint and steel, patient hands, dry tinder, and a little luck. You can feel that truth in the way this woman banks the hearth. She nudges the coals into a tighter nest, lets ash fall over them, then pauses to study the result with the same concentration a jeweler might give to a tiny stone. In a strange way, that is what the coals are tonight. Little red jewels hidden under gray dust, precious because they may still shine in the morning. A man near the wall counts the remaining fuel. Not formally, not aloud, just with his eyes. A few sticks. One thicker piece of wood. Perhaps some peat or dried turf stacked near the door. In parts of medieval England, and across medieval Europe more broadly, households relied on whatever fuel they could secure. Wood, where wood was available. Peat where the land allowed it. Dried turf. Brush. Sometimes dried dung. The last option is not glamorous, admittedly. No one writes poems about its fragrance. Still, heat tends to improve reputations. The room smells of smoke and something rougher, earthier, a heavier fuel, burning low. Your throat notices it before your mind does. Yet the family does not react. They are used to it. That may be one of the great dividing lines between modern comfort and medieval survival. We expect comfort to feel clean. They expected survival to feel smoky. You stay close to the hearth for a while, and as your eyes adjust, you begin noticing where everyone will sleep. The warmest patch of floor has already been claimed in the mind, if not yet fully in the body. Blankets are laid there. Old cloaks have been shaken out. Coarse wool has been folded double, where the cold tends to rise from below. A kettle sits near the edge of the embers, not boiling, only warming. A little hot water before bed can matter enormously in a world where warmth is rationed. Even a quick rinse of hands or face can feel like a kindness. The youngest children are prepared first. That seems to happen in cottage after cottage. They are tucked deeper into the best fabric, nudged toward the center of the sleeping cluster, and watched with the peculiar blend of tenderness and fatigue that belongs to winter parenting. One child wriggles under a blanket and laughs when a gust snakes across the floor and chills his ankles. The mother fixes him with a look that says, "This is not a season for unnecessary leg movements." He stills at once. You look at what people are wearing. Layers and more layers. Linen close to the skin, where possible. Wool above it. Fur when fortune allows. The clothing is thick, scratchy, practical. You can almost feel it on your own shoulders. The drag of wool, the slight itch at the neck, the warmth gradually building under weight and friction. The cold changes the sound of fabric, too. A sleeve rubbing against a sleeve has a dry, crisp whisper. Blankets settling over straw produce a muted crackle. Shoes set aside on rushes make a soft thump. There is no background hum of electrical life here. No vent. No passing traffic. So these small sounds become the room's entire music. Another thing becomes clear as the candle burns lower. Winter sleep in this world is deeply social. Privacy is thin. Breath is shared. Sleep is heard, smelled, and felt. When one person coughs, everyone hears it. When a child rolls over, the bedding shifts for others too. The room contains not just individual sleepers, but a collective effort to hold warmth. That is a very different emotional world from ours. The dark does not isolate people here. It presses them together. You settle yourself near the wall and watch one family member tuck cloth more firmly over the shutter gaps. Another adjusts bedding closer to the fire, but not so close that sparks could jump and punish everyone for optimism. There is always calculation in the arrangement. The safest distance. The warmest angle. The least draft. The thickest fold of blanket placed where cold settles hardest. At last, the candles are pinched out. Darkness folds down quickly. Only the embers remain. Small red points beneath a skin of ash. In this half-light, the room changes character. Faces disappear. The hearth becomes a low constellation. You hear one log collapse inward with a soft sigh. Someone murmurs to a child. A baby lets out a brief, unhappy sound, then sinks back into silence. This is when you understand something else the source script suggested. Darkness itself acts like insulation. Not physically, perhaps, but behaviorally. Once the room is dark, no one is tempted to move unnecessarily. There is nothing to do but settle, save heat, and drift. Winter sleep becomes less like an ending to the day and more like a joint retreat from exposure. You might think the story would remain inside one family, one hearth, one night. But the village has another answer to the cold, and it is wonderfully simple. People become part of each other's weatherproofing. Deeper in the settlement stands a slightly larger cottage where several households have gathered. You can feel the difference before you even see it. The air by the doorway is warmer. The windows glow a little more heavily. And when you step inside, the reason is obvious. Bodies. Many of them. Several families have made a common nest of the room. The warmth here is still humble. Let us not overstate the case. This is not luxurious heat, but compared with the lonely edge of a dying hearth, it feels generous. The room hums softly, with low voices and the slow physical presence of many people preparing to lie down in the same space. Straw mattresses have been dragged side by side. Cloaks and blankets overlap. Children are directed toward the middle. Adults take the outer edges, the places where the cold will press first. A historian would phrase this cautiously. In some regions and under some conditions, communal sleeping arrangements were common, practical, and culturally ordinary. The exact extent is debated because poorer households rarely left detailed records of nightly habits. But standing here, with all this breath and wool and tiredness gathered in one room, The logic is impossible to miss. Each body is a furnace. Put enough furnaces close together, and winter has a slightly harder job. A man near the wall waves you inward with the kind of half-amused kindness people reserve for those who are obviously freezing and trying to look brave about it. Someone hands you a rough blanket that smells strongly of lanolin and long use. It scratches your neck when you draw it around your shoulders, but warmth gathers beneath it almost at once. That is the old bargain with wool. It may not flatter you, but it shows up for work. You lower yourself onto one of the straw beds and feel how the mattress responds. It is uneven, packed tighter in some places, loose in others. The stalks crackle beneath shifting weight. Yet warmth has already begun to accumulate there because bodies have been sitting and kneeling and pressing into it. Air trapped in the straw holds what heat it can. Blankets above keep more of it from escaping. Nothing here is wasteful. Even a mattress is a small engine of retained warmth. A woman with a tired face and kind eyes explains the principle without calling it science. You sleep together because cold does not care about embarrassment. There is something wonderfully direct about that. Winter reduces many questions to function. Children curl up first, feet tucked under blankets, heads disappearing into crooks of arms and old shawls. An elderly man settles himself slowly with the serious concentration of someone negotiating a peace treaty with his own joints. A dog is invited into the circle and accepts the honor with immediate commitment. It turns twice, sighs deeply, and becomes another source of warmth. Breathing begins to synchronize. That is the part I always find most striking in scenes like this. At first, the room is full of separate people. Then, gradually, the rise and fall of breath aligns. Someone exhales. Another answers unconsciously. Blankets lift and settle. The sleeping cluster becomes less like a crowd and more like one large animal made of wool and patience. You notice how smell changes too. Warm wool, damp hems drying, straw, human skin, a little cooked vegetable, a little smoke, a little dog. In another context, those scents might seem harsh. Here they signal life, heat, continuity. The room smells like a village choosing not to surrender. One child whispers to another. Somewhere near the center of the bedding circle, there is a soft burst of laughter, quickly shushed. A mother strokes hair. An older sister tucks a blanket edge more firmly around a small pair of feet. There is tenderness here, but it is practical tenderness. Love expressed as insulation. The fire at the far end of the room is lower than you expect. That is because the room itself is doing part of the work now. This is another lesson worth lingering on. Medieval people did not rely on one solution. They combined weak solutions until the result became strong enough. A low fire, a sealed shutter, a wool blanket, a dog, 3 children in the middle, 2 adults at the edge, straw below, breath above. Piece by piece, survivable sleep emerges. You lie back for a while and study the darkness above the clustered forms. The roof beams vanish into shadow, here and there. The faint red pulse of the hearth touches the edges of hanging cloth or a rough timber post. You can feel heat pooling where bodies meet, and cooling again where air slips low across the floor. The difference is subtle, but real. If you stretch one hand too far from the blanket, the cold finds it quickly. That, perhaps, is the final truth of this part of the story. Medieval people did not sleep through winter because they possessed some forgotten superhuman tolerance. They slept because they adapted constantly. They moved closer. They layered more. They banked the fire. They chose straw, wool, darkness, heavy meals, closed shutters, shared rooms, and shared breathing. Sleep itself became a crafted shelter. You stay long enough to feel the communal room grow slower and heavier. Voices disappear. The dog twitches once in sleep. The embers pulse at the far end of the room. Outside, the wind continues to roam the village lanes, indifferent and searching. Inside, for now, human warmth holds its little ground. And as you ease yourself back up and prepare to leave this crowded nest of sleepers behind, you know the next answers will not be found only in bodies gathered together, but in the beds beneath them, the straw, the wool, the curtains, and all the material tricks by which winter was softened. If never fully defeated, you step away from the warmth of clustered sleepers and back into the lane, and the cold greets you with immediate honesty. It touches your cheeks, slips through the seams of your coat, and reminds you that communal warmth, for all its usefulness, is only one answer among many. Medieval winter did not ask for one clever trick. It asked for layers of them, one weak answer placed on top of another, until together they became strong enough to last until morning. The next cottage you enter smells different from the others. There is still smoke in the air, still wool, still that faint note of old rushes and damp hems drying too slowly by the hearth. But under all of that, there is another scent. Straw. Dry. Dusty. Sun remembered in winter. It rests in the room like a ghost of late summer, the stored remains of fields now buried under frost. A family is preparing a bed, and their movements are so practiced that for a moment it feels like you are watching a craft rather than a chore. They spread the straw carefully across a low wooden frame. Not too thin, not too thick. The bundles are shaken out, loosened with patient hands, then patted and leveled. You kneel beside the bed and reach down to touch it. The straw gives with a little whispering crackle, then pushes back. It is not soft in the modern sense. Nobody here would mistake it for luxury. And yet, there is intelligence in it. Air lives between the stalks, and trapped air means insulation. These people may not speak of thermal properties in polished language, but they know what works. They know fresh straw warms faster than flattened straw. They know a bed that breathes a little is kinder than one pressed cold and dead against the body. A child smooths a coarse linen sheet over the top, pulling it straight with both hands, his face set in the kind of concentration children reserve for tasks that clearly matter to the adults around them. The linen is rough, but clean enough, and it changes the bed at once. Straw becomes mattress. Field becomes shelter. Beneath your fingers, the sheet feels cool at first, then less cool as the trapped warmth beneath it begins to gather. That is the quiet genius of medieval bedding. It is less about softness than about arrangement. Each layer does its small job. The mother adds another layer, Wool this time, folded and tucked with a care that suggests the blanket has earned respect over many winters. It is patched in places. Some of the patches do not quite match. One corner is darker than the rest, and one strip along the edge clearly came from an older garment that could no longer serve as clothing. None of that matters. What matters is thickness, weight. Fiber is dense enough to hold warmth once the body gives it something to keep. You brush the fabric with your fingertips and feel the faint, waxy trace of lanolin still clinging to it. It smells earthy, almost animal, but in this room the smell is reassuring. Wool does not apologize for what it is. A man nearby notices your interest and lifts a wool tunic from a peg so you can feel its full weight. It hangs heavily in your hands, more like weather than clothing. Honestly, there is something almost heroic about medieval wool. It is scratchy. It is stubborn. It looks as though it would win an argument with the wind out of sheer persistence. The man smiles at your expression and says that on nights like this, comfort means being slightly annoyed by your own blanket and grateful for it at the same time. That sounds about right. He tells you that wool mattered to England in ways that reached far beyond sleep. Textile historians often point out that wool was one of the kingdom's most valuable resources, central to trade, wealth, daily clothing, and survival through damp cold. That larger history hums quietly under this little domestic scene. The blanket over the bed is not just a blanket. It belongs to an entire economy of sheep, shearing, carding, spinning, weaving, mending, and handing things down because throwing away good warmth would be almost immoral. Near the hearth, a woman cards raw wool with slow, steady motions. Pale fibers lift into the air and drift briefly in the firelight like tiny feathers. They settle on her lap, on her sleeves, on the bench beside her. The room seems softer for their presence. Even sound changes in a wool-rich room. The crackle of the fire is muffled. Footsteps soften. Voices stay low. Wool does not only hold heat, it changes atmosphere. It makes the room feel upholstered against winter. The family prepares for sleep in layers. The children pull wool caps over their heads. One little boy, proud of his own cap, insists you try one as well. It fits snugly over the ears, and the effect is immediate enough to make you laugh softly. Warmth at the head does matter. Families knew that long before anyone wrote it down in scientific terms. The father grins and shares a village joke that sleeping without a cap lets winter spirits nibble at your thoughts. It is exactly the kind of thing people say half in humor and half because winter has a way of making old sayings feel more plausible than they should. The children climb onto the bed and disappear beneath the upper folds of wool. Their feet tuck inward instinctively. Their knees draw up toward the warmth. The mother smooths the blankets tight, so no draft can slip easily inside. The room is cool. The bedding is not yet fully warm. It will need bodies for that. But even now, watching the layers settle, you can see the shape of future warmth waiting to be made. You leave that cottage reluctantly, and the village gives you another answer before the cold has fully settled back into your coat. The next house belongs to people with a little more means. You feel that before you understand it. The timber frame is straighter. The glow through the shutters is richer. Inside, the hearth burns with a confidence the poorer homes could not afford. The smell is different too. Beeswax, roasted grain, a little less smoke, a little more room. The floors are cleaner. Woven coverings soften your steps. At the center of the room stands a feather bed, so lush that it almost seems indecent in weather like this. After straw and patched wool and communal nests of necessity, this thing looks like an argument in favor of inherited wealth. It rises on a carved frame above the cold floor. Its surface swells softly under its linen sheet, and when you place your hand upon it, the feathers shift with a whisper and receive your weight as though welcoming it. It is absurdly inviting. The man of the house pats the bed with familial affection and explains that it belonged to his father, and to his father before that. Goose down, carefully gathered and maintained, is among the warmest fillings available to those who can afford it. Economic historians often note that feather beds could be valuable enough to appear in wills alongside land, livestock, and money. And standing here beside one, you understand why. This is not only bedding, it is inheritance. A warm inheritance, which may be the best kind. His wife spreads a smooth linen sheet over the surface. The cloth falls in soft waves. Then comes a wool quilt, stitched from dyed squares, followed by another quilt, this one filled with down as well. Each layer settles more gently than the rough blankets in poorer cottages, but the principle is familiar. Layer upon layer. Always the same winter logic. Warmth is made by accumulation. Wealth simply allows the accumulation to feel elegant. A servant enters carrying small pillows stuffed with feathers. He fluffs them briskly, and a faint smell rises from them. Herbs tucked into the lining, chamomile perhaps, or rose petals, or something else chosen to soothe and freshen. Household records from wealthier homes sometimes mention bedding, perfumed with herbs for sleep and cleanliness. The detail feels almost surreal after the smoky closeness of the peasant cottages, and yet it belongs to the same world. Everyone is trying to make winter tolerable. Some do it with patched wool, some with rose-scented pillows. The daughter of the house brings a fur coverlet and lays it across the foot of the bed. You touch it and feel warmth even before it has been occupied. Fur can do that. It seems to understand cold personally. At the final layer, the whole bed resembles a small hill of captured comfort, rising in the center of the chamber like a private season, apart from the one outside. A fortress made of softness. Still, even here, there is no perfect certainty. The father mentions that scholars debate where feather beds were best placed. Some old sources suggest keeping them away from the coldest walls to prevent clumping from dampness. Others imply they were positioned near interior walls for warmth. Practices varied, he says with a shrug that suggests medieval people were just as capable of household argument as anyone now. It is oddly comforting to imagine a noble couple disagreeing over optimal featherbed placement while the wind moans outside like an unpaid musician. As you move through the village from cottage to cottage, one truth keeps returning in different clothes. Winter sleep is built, crafted, adjusted, whether the mattress is straw or down, whether the blanket smells of lanolin or herbs. Whether the bed sits low by the hearth or high in a carved frame, each household uses what it has to shape a warmer night out of hostile air. You pass from the noble chamber back into humbler rooms where wool dominates again. One family hangs wool cloth along the interior walls. Another tucks wool scraps into gaps near the door. A grandmother shakes out a heavy blanket and says, with perfect seriousness, that this old thing has seen more winters than her son and behaves better than he does. The son laughs, because it is true. The blanket, for all its age, remains dependable. That might be the kindest thing anyone can say about a person or a piece of bedding in a village like this. Again and again, you see the same small physical truths. Weight equals comfort. Thickness equals confidence. Scratchy fabric is better than noble ideas about softness if it keeps the cold off your skin. A child pressing cold feet into the fold of a wool blanket understands the world just as clearly as any scholar. Heat must be held. It does not stay because you want it to. By now, the village has taught you to notice little things. The way blankets are tucked around ankles first. The way the upper edge is folded inward to trap warmer air near the chest. The way a second garment is draped over the shoulders before sleep, not for style, but because shoulders cool quickly when the fire declines. A mother smoothing a wrinkle from the bedding is not performing domestic neatness. She is closing a future channel for cold air. You linger a while beside another straw bed prepared with extraordinary care. Fresh straw below, linen above, wool folded thick near the feet, a little sachet of dried plant tucked into the seam, perhaps for freshness, perhaps because someone believes it helps with dreams. That blend of practicality and private belief seems to belong everywhere in this winter world. A thing can be useful and comforting and symbolic all at once. No one here needs to separate those categories cleanly. The room grows slower. Fire sinks lower. The family begins to lie down. The straw speaks under their weight. The wool settles. One child sighs with the little full body relief that comes when cold toes finally meet trapped warmth. You know that feeling. Everyone does. You know that moment when the bed stops being merely a surface and begins turning into a climate. And so the lesson of these homes settles over you. Medieval people did not sleep warmly because they possessed miraculous houses. They slept warmly, when they managed it, because they understood materials intimately. Straw, line, wool, fur, down, herbs, patches, old cloth. Every texture had a role. Every household knew which layer touched skin, which layer held the heat, which layer blocked the draft, and which one was only brought out when winter became especially cruel. You step back outside once more, and the cold rushes up to meet you as if offended by all this domestic ingenuity. Snow glints under the moon. Your breath drifts upward in pale ribbons, yet now you carry with you the memory of straw springing under linen, of wool weight settling over children, of feather beds keeping company with fur, of rooms made gentler by cloth and patience. The village has not solved winter. It has learned how to live beside it. One mattress, one blanket, one careful layer at a time. The lane ahead is quieter now. Many of the cottages you passed earlier have gone dim, their weak fires smothered under ash. their windows shuttered, their sleepers folded into blankets and shared warmth. But the village is not finished teaching you. If straw and wool explain one part of winter sleep, the houses themselves explain another. Some people warmed the body. Others warmed the space around the body. The difference sounds small until you step into the next home and feel it with your own skin. This cottage is narrow, a little taller than the others, and built with a strange practicality that only becomes clear once you cross the threshold. The hearth burns low. The room itself is cool, but the family does not seem troubled, and soon you see why. Built directly into the wall is a sleeping niche, enclosed on 3 sides by thick timber, raised just above the coldest part of the floor, and curtained across the open face like a secret kept in plain sight. You crouch beside it and run your fingers across the wood. It is smooth in places from long use, rougher in others, where age and dryness have pulled the grain into ridges. The air inside the niche feels different from the air in the room. Slightly warmer, slightly stiller. That change is immediate enough to feel almost magical. But of course it is not magic. It is volume, less space to warm, fewer surfaces through which cold can move freely, more opportunity for a sleeper's own breath and body heat to accumulate around them instead of disappearing into the room. The woman of the house invites you to climb inside for a moment. When you do, the effect becomes clearer still. The low ceiling draws close above you. The wooden walls at either side soften sound. A curtain hangs near your knees, ready to close the little chamber off from the world. It feels like being inside the house's own memory of warmth. Compact, sheltered, not luxurious, but deeply convincing. She explains that on the coldest nights, her family sleeps in this niche rather than in the wider bed across the room. The niche sits above the coldest ground, below the draftiest part of the roof, and against insulated wall boards packed with straw and clay. It is, in other words, a position chosen by long experience. You press a hand to the inner wall and notice that it holds less chill than the exposed timbers outside. Builders had reinforced it with planks, stuffed gaps with straw, sealed edges with clay and hair. A house in winter is never truly finished. It is adjusted continually, and this niche is one of those adjustments turned permanent. Her little boy clambers in beside you, clutching a wooden horse. He tells you this is his favorite place in the house because it feels as if the bed hugs him. That is so disarmingly accurate that, for a moment, you cannot improve upon it. The boy says that when he was younger, he pretended the niche was a ship crossing icy seas. The mother laughs and says imagination is part of the insulation too. I rather think she is right. A place feels warmer if the mind accepts it as shelter. You step back out into the room, and the colder air presses against your face more distinctly than before. Even that contrast is a lesson. The niche is not simply warmer in the abstract. It is warmer enough to be felt immediately. The family closes the curtain again, and the little space returns to itself, holding its heat, its breath, its temporary privacy. In a world where most people sleep in shared rooms, that privacy matters almost as much as temperature. Behind a curtain, with the draft muted, even a poorhouse can create a tiny kingdom of softness. The next cottage takes that idea even further. Heavy bed curtains dominate the sleeping space. Thick woolen cloth hangs from a wooden frame over the bed and falls nearly to the floor, sealing warmth inside, like a portable room built within the larger room. When you part the curtain and lean in, warmer air slips out against your face in a soft wave. You feel it at once. Outside the curtain, the room is merely tolerable. Inside, the bed has its own weather. The woman sitting within explains the principle in simple terms. Fabric that does not move easily does not let warm air escape easily. She runs a hand over the inside surface to show you the density of the weave. It is not decorative fluff. It is thick, stitched, layered cloth meant to stop motion, both the motion of air and the motion of cold into the bed. She has tied small bundles of herbs along the curtain rod, partly to freshen the enclosed air, partly because no one enjoys sleeping in a warm bubble that smells of damp breath and old wool. Her husband taps the wooden frame overhead and tells you it must be strong. Winter damp from breathing bodies makes the curtains heavier over time. He also adds one of those domestic details that feels immediately real. Their frame is older than he is. His father added extra panels when the winters grew harsher. That sounds exactly like how people solve problems in hard climates, not by redesigning life from the ground up, but by adding another layer, another patch, another board, another curtain. Studies of medieval household life often note that bed curtains served privacy as well as warmth. In one-room houses, privacy was a rare and precious thing. The curtain allowed conversation to drop to a whisper. It allowed a family to feel enclosed, even if only by cloth. The husband jokes that a curtain full of holes might as well invite the cold into bed with you. It is a good joke because it contains the whole truth. Warmth is as much about controlling movement as about making heat. You sit inside the curtain bed for a little while and let yourself notice the details. The smell of wool, herbs, and sleeping bodies. The filtered firelight glowing through fabric. The outside room still audible, but distant, as though moved several yards away. The lower hem of the curtain weighted with small sewn stones so it hangs straight and seals more effectively. Each detail is modest on its own. Together they create something nearly luxurious. Not luxurious in the noble sense of feathers and fur, but luxurious in the older and more useful sense of being protected. When you step back out, the cold of the main room feels sharper than it did before. That is the curtain's entire argument made physical. Once people settle inside and breathe and give their heat to the enclosed space, the bed becomes a little climate all its own. Families even hang extra curtain layers on the worst nights. One barrier becomes two. One room becomes a room within a room. Winter is met not by fighting it directly, but by shrinking the space in which it can touch you. From there, the village teaches you another lesson. Sometimes the warmest bed in a poor household is not inside the main room at all. It is in the barn. You smell the place before you step through the door. Warm hay, animal breath, old straw, leather, the dense, earthy scent of livestock at rest. Compared with the knife-edge cold outside, the barn feels almost unnaturally warm. Not because of fire, but because animals are heat-made flesh. Cows shifting in their stalls release slow, heavy warmth into the air. Goats do the same, though with less dignity. A man sitting on a stool near a cow grins and says cows are more reliable than fire because they never forget to stay warm. It is exactly the kind of rural joke that survives because it is largely true. He shows you a raised platform with straw bedding in one corner. On the coldest nights, he says, the family sometimes sleeps out here. Not every night, not in all households, and historians still debate how common barn sleeping truly was among the rural poor. Records are scattered and circumstances varied. But in hard weather, people used whatever worked. And here, what works is obvious. The warmth from animals settles into the bedding, into the air, into the boards themselves. You sit on the straw platform and feel heat rising from beneath you. A cow shifts nearby with a low rumble. Warm breath puffs into the air in little clouds. Goats rustle. Pigs huddle under hay with the commitment of creatures who take warmth personally. Chickens fluff themselves on a beam and contribute a lesser but still real degree of life to the air. The whole barn feels like one large breathing blanket, which is exactly how the man's daughter describes it when she arrives with a basket of grain. A breathing blanket. You could not improve upon that either. The family points out that in some houses, the barn and cottage share a wall so animal heat can seep into the living space. You place your hand on the boards and feel that it is true. The wall is warmer than the outer walls of the cottage. Livestock warmth was not seen as crude or shameful. It was simply another resource, one integrated into daily life as naturally as hay, milk, leather, or manure. In a world where fuel was precious and winter was long, ignoring that heat would have been foolish. The girl tells you they sometimes bring warm stones from the hearth and place them under bedding in the barn. Extra hay is stacked against drafty walls. Blankets are layered over the family, over dogs, sometimes close enough to the goats that everyone involved has to develop a tolerant sense of humor. Her father adds that goats like to steal warmth with suspicious enthusiasm. The statement has the tone of someone speaking from experience. The barn teaches a harder but gentler truth. Human survival here is interwoven with animal survival. Sleep is not a private contest between one body and the cold. It is a network. Beasts warm walls, walls block wind. Hay insulates the floor. Dogs share blankets. People move where life is densest, because densest life is warmest. You leave the barn carrying the smell of hay in your clothes and move on to another layer of winter craft. The house itself as a continuously patched defense against drafts. In one cottage, a man kneels by the wall, pressing fresh daub into a crack between timbers. His wife hands him clay mixed with straw. A child stuffs moss into gaps at the base of the wall with all the solemn pride of someone performing a meaningful civic duty. In a sense, he is. The smallest gap can invite a ribbon of icy air across the floor all night long. You watch the man smooth the daub into place. He works carefully, because rough repairs done in darkness and cold can make tomorrow's night worse rather than better. The woman shows you woven rush mats across the floor and explains that they keep feet from bare cold boards and earth. They also absorb some damp and hold a little warmth. Herbs are sometimes scattered among them to sweeten the room. Again, the same pattern. Practicality softened by comfort where possible. The loft above is packed with straw at the roof edges. The man climbs up and pushes more into a gap where the thatch has loosened. Winds find roofs the way water finds cracks, patiently and without mercy. Families spend the whole winter waging tiny campaigns against drafts. Shutters are lined with cloth. Wool scraps are stuffed into door frames. Stones are arranged near hearths to hold warmth longer after the visible flames die. The father admits that scholars still debate how consistently poorer households could maintain such defenses. Some winters in some families would have had fewer materials, less time, less strength. But he shrugs and says people used what they had. That may be the best summary of the entire village. Winter was not survived by ideal houses, but by persistent houses. Houses adjusted day by hands, too tired to call what they were doing ingenuity. You stand in the middle of this patched room and realize how much labor is hidden in a single bearable night. Every sealed seam, every curtain hem, every stuffed gap, every loaded stone by the hearth, every layer of hay in the loft. Sleep is the visible result. The work that makes it possible begins hours earlier, and in some ways began months earlier when straw was stored, wool kept, herbs dried, clay set aside, and blankets mended. By now, the sky outside has deepened, and the village lanes have gone nearly still. The fires are low. The sleepers are settling. The cold is at its most patient. Yet the homes around you no longer look flimsy. They look resourceful. Not perfect, never perfect, but shaped by generations who knew exactly where winter entered and where it could be slowed. That is the mood you carry onward. The narrow niche that hugs a child. The curtain room within a room. The barn breathing with hidden warmth. The wall patched with clay, moss, and wool. The rushes muting the floor. The loft stuffed against the roof. None of these things would impress someone shopping for modern convenience. Yet together they amount to something remarkable. A village-wide intelligence. A shared understanding of how to carve livable pockets out of bitter weather. As you step back out into the lane, the wind moves around you again, colder near the ankles, sharper at the hands. But now it feels less mysterious. You know what the households are doing in answer to it. They are shrinking the spaces that must be warmed, thickening the barriers, borrowing heat from cloth, from wood, from straw, from beasts, from each other. The whole village is full of these small enclosed worlds, each one holding its own little climate against the larger dark. And as you walk on, you know the next answers will lie even closer to the body itself, in food, clothing, herbs, and the small rituals by which people prepared their own flesh and breath to endure the long hours until dawn. You leave the patched walls and curtained beds behind, and the next lesson waits closer to the skin. Medieval people did not face winter nights with architecture alone. They prepared the body itself, as if the body were another house that needed layering, sealing, feeding, and calming before it could survive until dawn. You feel that truth almost at once when you step into the next cottage and find a woman seated near the embers with a linen nightshirt folded across her lap. The room is cooler than some of the others you have visited. The fire is nearly gone, more memory than flame, and the air at ankle height is cold enough to make you instinctively shift your weight. Yet the family moving about the room does not seem defeated by that. They are engaged in another kind of work now. not warming the house, but clothing themselves for sleep with the same seriousness others give to shutters, dope, or firewood. The woman lifts the shirt so you can feel it. Linen first. That is her rule. It is rougher than anything a modern sleeper would call soft, but not unpleasant. The fibers have been worn and washed and worn again until they bend more easily. Linen does not hold heat the way wool does, but that is not really its task. It lies closest to the body, gathers what warmth and moisture it can, and makes the heavier layers more bearable. She runs her fingers down one sleeve, pauses at a patch she has just finished mending, and smiles with the tired satisfaction of someone who knows a small repair tonight may mean a warmer morning tomorrow. Beside the shirt lies a woolen over-tunic meant for sleeping on the harshest nights. It is heavier than you expect, even after everything else you have touched in this village. When she places it in your hands, its weight seems to carry winter itself, or perhaps the answer to winter. The cloth is dense, faintly oily with lanolin, and built less like a graceful garment than a practical shield. I have always found it strange that modern people think of bedtime as a moment to strip away layers, while in a medieval English winter, the intelligent thing was often the opposite. You kept warmth close by, wearing as much of it as you reasonably could. Her husband enters from a darker corner of the cottage, already dressed for sleep. A long linen shirt reaches below his knees. Over it he wears a thick wool jerkin tied at the waist with cord. On his legs are tightly knit woolen stockings that climb almost to the thigh. He pats one stocking with satisfaction and says, in the tone of a man discussing sound engineering, that cold legs make for a foolish morning. It is a good line, and one that sounds born of repeated experience. Feet and lower legs cool quickly in a room where fire has died down, and once that cold settles into the joints, the next day begins poorly. The daughter of the house appears wearing a wool cap lined with linen. It covers her ears and sits close across her forehead. She tells you that without it she wakes cold no matter how many blankets she has. Heat rises. Heads lose it. Winter notices. The little cap may not look like much, but here it belongs to the same family of survival tools as banked embers and patched walls. She offers you another cap to try. When you pull it over your head, warmth gathers almost immediately around the ears. Not enough to make you forget the room is cold, but enough to make you understand why families treasured such things. Her father laughs and says that in some villages people believed sleeping bareheaded invited winter spirits to nibble at your dreams. He says it lightly, but with the air of someone who sees no reason to offend either physics or folklore if he can help it. Gloves rest near the bed as well. One pair of thin linen, another of rougher wool. The mother explains that her own hands ache badly if left bare through bitter nights. Once fingers stiffen, they lose heat quickly and recover slowly. It occurs to you that winter sleep here is not only about staying alive in the broad sense. It is also about managing all the small discomforts that erode strength day after day. Cold fingers, numb feet, a chilled scalp. Each one steals from tomorrow. Children's clothing hangs from pegs nearby. Tiny stockings, small patched tunics, little shawls folded carefully, because even children must be dressed strategically for sleep. The girl explains with great seriousness that her grandmother once lined her socks with a little rabbit fur at the toes. A luxury, perhaps, but a very focused one. Not jewelry, not decoration, just warmer toes in the middle of winter. From clothing, the lesson moves naturally to food, because a warm body needs fuel as much as covering. The smell reaches you before you see the pot. Rich, thick, comforting. Not the smell of feast food, perhaps, but of food chosen wisely for cold weather. A woman in the next house is stirring a pot of evening pottage while steam rises in slow curls and softens the room. Barley, perhaps. Oats. Root vegetables. A little salted pork if fortune has smiled. A shimmer of fat on the surface if fortune has smiled properly. She ladles some into a bowl and places it in your hands. The heat of it is immediate and almost embarrassingly moving. Your fingers cling to the clay as if the bowl were making promises. When you lift it and taste, the broth is thick and slightly greasy in the best possible way, coating the throat, settling heavily in the stomach, spreading warmth that feels different from fire. Slower, deeper, more loyal. The father of the house nods and says that a full belly guards the body through the night. There is a broader truth here that historians recognize. Heavy evening meals, especially those rich in fat and grain, would have helped people maintain body heat in cold conditions. Medieval villagers did not speak in calories and metabolism, but they certainly understood that certain foods sat better in the body through a freezing night than others. Pork fat, oat porridge, barley pottage, peas, beans, butter when available. All of these appear and reappear in winter diets, not because they are fashionable, but because they endure. The older boy at the table leans over and tells you, with the pleased confidence of someone passing on household wisdom, that peas stick to your ribs and keep you warm until morning. It is a phrase half humorous and half exact. The mother nods and says that on especially bad nights, she will stir extra fat into the pot if she can spare it. Even a spoonful matters. A warm stomach means deeper sleep. Deeper sleep means fewer waking hours spent feeling the room turn cold around you. She then brings out a small bowl of preserved meat held in a glaze of rendered fat. It is winter stock, used carefully. Dense, salty, rich enough to transform a plain supper into something that warms the body from within for hours. A cup follows, herbal and hot. Nettle, perhaps elderberry. Something bitter softened with a little honey if the household can spare it. The steam carries a sharper scent than the pottage, almost medicinal. When you drink, the liquid warms your chest first, then spreads outward slowly. This cottage also keeps little cloth sachets of herbs tucked among the bedding and hanging near the hearth. Lavender, chamomile, rosemary, mint. The woman opens one and lets you smell it. The fragrance is immediate, soft and green even in the middle of winter, carrying a memory of fields and gardens that now lie asleep under frost. She says the herbs calm the mind, ease the body, sweeten the air, and sometimes help children settle more quickly. The family prepares bedding with these herbs almost ceremonially. A small sachet under a pillow. A pinch of dried leaves between blanket layers. A little bundle hung beside the bed, where warmth from sleeping bodies will release the scent more fully. A child crushes mint in his hand and laughs when the smell suddenly sharpens around him. His sister accuses him of trying to wake the whole room. The mother smiles and says, "Mint is for heavy air, lavender is for troubled thoughts, and chamomile is for anyone too stubborn to relax." Her husband glances at you and says, "That last part sounds directed." You suspect he is right. The village healer's house deepens that idea. Dried plants hang in bundles from rafters and door frames. The room smells of lavender, rosemary, and chamomile, with something sharper underneath. She crushes herbs in a mortar with slow, patient turns of the wrist, then tips the mixture into small cloth packets meant for pockets and pillows. She tells you some are for easing breath, some for quieting coughs, some for calming dreams. She does not claim miracles. That makes her more convincing. She offers you a cup of warm brew flavored with herbs and a little honey. It is slightly bitter, then sweet, then faintly floral. The warmth of it settles in a way that feels less like food and more like permission to soften. Around the room are bowls, hanging bundles, little stitched pouches, and small clay dishes meant for steeping herbs near a fire so the room fills with scent. If the cold cannot always be defeated, it can at least be met in an atmosphere that is gentler, calmer, and less raw. By the time you leave the healer's house, the pattern is unmistakable. Clothing, food, drink, herbs, all of them work toward the same end. Keep heat in. Build heat up. Calm the mind. Reduce waking. Soften the body before it meets the long dark. A weak fire by itself is not enough. But a weak fire combined with wool layers, thick pottage, herbal steam, warm broth, a good cap, and patience begins to look like a system. You move through one more house before the lesson is complete. A mother is helping her children dress for bed. Nightshirts first, then shawls, then stockings, then caps. The children complain mildly, in the way children always do when wrapped toward comfort. One says he will suffocate. Another says her cap scratches. The mother replies that being slightly inconvenienced is much better than freezing, which is one of the finest lines Winter ever wrote. She pulls the blanket over them anyway. The father, already seated on the bed, explains that some people sleep in the same garments they wore during the day, especially if undressing means inviting too much cold into the process. Others keep separate night clothes for winter if they can manage it. Historians still debate how universal certain practices were across class and region. That feels entirely reasonable. Medieval England was not one single room repeated endlessly. But the broad truth remains. Sleep clothing mattered because cloth clung to the body in ways room heat could not. You watch the family settle. Wool whispers against wool. Linen creases. Stockings rub together. The blankets rise and fall. Everything about the scene feels slower now, as though the whole cottage is moving toward a common center of gravity. The meal is finished. The herbs are in place. The nightclothes are on. The body has been prepared. And you realize how intimate this knowledge must have been. Families knew their own winter weakness with remarkable precision. Whose feet cooled first? Who woke coughing? Who needed extra broth? Who would kick off a blanket in sleep and regret it by dawn? This is survival. Yes, but it is survival made personal. Outside, the village remains under snow and sharp stars. Inside, people are turning themselves into small self-contained climates, layer by layer. The body as hearth, the meal as fuel, the herbs as hush, the shirt, the cap, the stocking, the hot bowl, the warm drink. None of it is excessive. None of it is wasted. It is all directed toward one quiet hope, that the sleeper may lie down warm enough, full enough, calm enough, to remain mostly asleep until daylight loosens winter's grip. You step back into the lane, carrying the scent of herbs in your clothes and the warmth of broth somewhere low in your chest. The cold still waits for you. Of course. It always does. But now you know that many medieval people answered winter first with the house, then with the bed, and finally with the body itself. And from that understanding, the story is ready to widen again, beyond the family cottage and into stranger kinds of winter sleep, harsher and grander, holier and more uncertain. The sleep of monks, travelers, servants, and those who must survive the road as well as the night. The village has taught you how peasants endure the cold, how households build warmth from straw and wool and clever architecture, how the body is fed and layered and soothed before sleep. But winter does not belong only to villagers tucked behind shuttered windows. It moves through every social rank, every road, every stone corridor where human beings must close their eyes and trust the night to pass. And so now the story widens. You leave the herbal cottage and follow the lane toward a darker, quieter building on the edge of the settlement. It rises low and solid from the ground, more stone than timber, with narrow windows and a stillness that feels deliberate rather than abandoned. A monastery. Even before you step inside, the place gives off another kind of winter entirely. Less domestic, less improvised, colder in spirit, though not unkind. The snow around it lies undisturbed, except for a few neat tracks. The door opens with a groan that seems to have been waiting all night to be heard. Inside, the air smells of wax, cold stone, and a trace of incense left behind by evening prayer. The floor answers your boots with a chill that rises through the soles. Candles burn thinly in iron holders. Their light does not conquer the dark so much as coexist with it. A monk in a wool robe greets you with quiet composure and leads you down a narrow passage where every sound is softened by stone. The farther you go, the colder it feels. That alone tells you something. This place does not chase comfort aggressively. The dormitory stretches before you in a long, plain room of wooden beds and simple bedding. Straw mattresses, coarse wool blankets, narrow spacing, no heavy curtains, no feather beds, no clustered family nest, just bed after bed, lined with monastic discipline. The air moves lightly through the room, and where it touches your face, it feels almost startling after the smaller enclosed spaces of the village cottages. The monk explains that sleeping together in a shared room offers practical warmth, but also reflects spiritual equality. Their beds are placed close enough for bodies to contribute some heat to the common space, yet not so close that privacy vanishes entirely. That balance, like everything here, is intentional. A younger monk passes carrying a small clay cup of water and sets it beside his bed. The older monk remarks, almost casually, that in severe weather the surface may freeze before dawn. You touch one of the blankets. It is thick enough to matter, but far from lavish. The robe worn during the day becomes night clothing as well. Austerity runs through the room like another draft. Some monastic rules, historians note, valued endurance of physical hardship as part of spiritual discipline. Cold was not merely inconvenience, it was instruction. Not every order enforced it equally, and records vary. Some houses allowed more warmth, some less. Still, standing here, with frost beginning to gather on the inner edge of stone and the beds lined like patient penances, you feel the truth of the principle. Sleep here is not built for indulgence. The bell sounds somewhere deeper in the complex, and a few of the monks rise for prayer. In the village, warmth encourages longer rest where possible. In the monastery, sleep is interrupted deliberately. Cold stone floors meet bare feet, or feet wrapped only in rough cloth. Bodies leave straw and blanket and return to prayer because time itself has been divided by devotion rather than comfort. One monk tells you that during the first winters, novices sometimes try to sneak extra wrapping into bed. He smiles faintly at the memory. The rule is firm, but the body always pleads its case. In a smaller side room, the monks gather for prayer under candlelight. Their voices are low and steady, their breath visible in the air. There is warmth in the sound, if not the temperature. It occurs to you that this place survives winter, partly by giving discomfort a meaning beyond itself. That is a powerful form of insulation. Some warmth enters the body through fire, some through purpose. Yet even the monastery is not without modest practical tricks. One younger monk quietly shows you a sealed clay jug, once filled with warm water and tucked beneath bedding on the hardest nights. Another mentions wrapping feet in spare cloth strips cut from old robes. These are not contradictions of discipline. They are acknowledgments that flesh remains flesh, even in stone corridors. When you step back outside, the cold feels more personal again. The monastery had its own way of quieting it, but not through the household softness you have come to know. You follow the road now beyond the cluster of village homes, and soon a different kind of shelter appears. A wider building with a lantern swinging faintly beside the entrance. Smoke drifting from a chimney, and a murmur of voices caught between exhaustion and relief. An inn. You enter and feel at once the difference that fire, ale, and temporary company can make. Cloaks steam near the hearth. Boots line the wall in uneven, wet rows. Travelers sit close to the fire with the loose, boneless posture of people who have spent too many hours fighting wind and frozen road. The room smells of damp wool, hot drink, smoke, and a little spilled broth. After the still discipline of the monastery, this warmth feels almost unruly. The innkeeper hands you a mug of hot ale flavored with ginger. The cup warms your palms first, then your throat, then something deeper. He says that in winter no traveler is turned away if there is floor enough left to occupy. Beds may be full. Platforms may be crowded. but there is always room near the fire. That sounds like policy and mercy woven together. In one corner, a traveler lies wrapped in a cloak with a small fire pot beside him. The little vessel glows through perforations in its lid, breathing out just enough heat to matter. Portable warmth, a private ember carried across public misery. The traveler tells you he bought it from a merchant and has trusted it more than half the people he has met on the road. That line would be bitter in another mouth. In his, it is simple gratitude. The innkeeper shows you the sleeping room. Raised wooden platforms, straw bedding, coarse blankets kept in chests against surprise arrivals. Travelers sleep fully clothed. Cloaks stay on. Boots remain near enough to pull on at once. Winter roads breed caution. A collapsed shed, a blocked door, an urgent departure before dawn. Any of these can happen, and a sleeping traveler who undresses completely may wake too slowly for comfort. A boy employed at the inn carries warm water into the room and sets it where sleepers may use it on waking. He tells you with cheerful authority that if the bucket stays near the door, it will freeze within the hour. It is the sort of observation that only matters if you live by it. Two young travelers speak to you from their bench by the fire. The girl says they slept last night in a fairy shed with only straw and cloaks to protect them. The boy adds that on the winter road, people share whatever they have because the cold reduces pride faster than it reduces distance. A blanket, a little food, news about a barn that still has a roof, the direction of the nearest inn. Kindness becomes a survival tool. From the inn, the story widens again toward the manor and the great hall. You have seen one wealthy chamber already, but now you enter the communal heart of a noble household. The hall is broad, shadowed overhead, and still warm from a fire built with larger logs than most villagers could afford to burn. Heat lingers in the stones around the hearth and in the very air above the floor. Servants move quietly through the room, finishing their last tasks, sweeping ash, setting vessels aside, carrying blankets to favored corners. The great hall teaches another version of winter sleep. Stored warmth, thick walls, heavy timber, large fires that burn longer and are fed more generously. A servant explains that the hall itself can remain warmer than smaller side rooms because stone and mass hold heat and give it back slowly. You place your hand near the hearthstones and feel they are still radiating warmth long after the flames have lowered. The hall is not cozy exactly. It is too large for that. But it is protective. Warmth has room to linger here. Not all who sleep in the manor sleep softly. Servants often settle near the embers after the family retires, choosing spots close to heat, stored in wall and floor. One alcove has become desirable because it sits near stones warmed all day. A servant laughs and tells you that last winter the household hound claimed that place first, and no one argued because, frankly, a warm dog is still warm. The hall reminds you that privilege cascades unevenly. Even in a richer house, warmth is distributed by rank, access, and proximity. A steward leads you farther in to a private chamber where noble sleep takes on its fullest form. Tapestries line the walls, not just for beauty, but to block drafts from stone. Carpets Soften the floor and blunt the upward chill. Heavy bed curtains enclose the sleeping space. Thick quilts, fur coverlets, bolsters, linen, and perhaps warmed vessels or heated stones beneath the frame create a bed that is less a piece of furniture than a controlled environment. This is winter managed by wealth. And still, you notice the same medieval logic underneath the luxury. Layering, enclosure, stored heat, shielded walls, thick fabric. The means differ, but the principle does not. Everyone is fighting the same enemy with whatever tools their station allows. The noble woman of the house smooths a fur coverlet across the bed and says that on bad nights they draw the curtains nearly shut and leave only a little gap for air. Her husband checks a warmed brass vessel placed beneath the frame to encourage heat upward through the mattress. Tapestries stir faintly at the walls. Candles soften every edge. The room is not simply warmer, it is calmer. Winter has been pushed farther away, made more distant, more abstract. Yet it is still there beyond the shutters, testing the seams. It is tempting to see the social differences too simply. Peasants in misery, nobles in comfort. But winter flattens some distinctions, even while preserving others. The noble bed is warmer, yes. The monastery colder in chosen ways. The inn more communal. The great hall more stored and shared. Yet across all of them, the same basic truths recur. Bodies need covering. Fires need tending. Buildings need sealing. Sleep is shaped by class, but it is never independent of climate. What perhaps changes most is the emotional texture of the night. In the monastery, winter sleep feels disciplined. In the inn, provisional. In the great hall, sheltered by mass and lingering heat. In the noble chamber, controlled and softened. Each form of sleep reveals a different relationship to cold, but all of them remain recognizably human. Everyone wants the same thing in the end. Enough shelter, enough warmth, enough quiet, enough fuel, enough cloth, enough mercy from the night. You stand for a while in the great hall after most others have settled. The fire has lowered. Tapestries hang heavy and dark. Somewhere a servant coughs. Somewhere a dog circles into sleep. The distant corridors of the manor hold their own layered hush. It strikes you that winter sleep in medieval England was never one thing. It was a spectrum of adaptations, each tied to rank, labor, belief, and luck, but all answering the same long question posed by cold. How do you close your eyes when the world beyond the wall is trying to take your heat? You do it with prayer. If you are a monk, with ale and borrowed blankets. If you are a traveler, with hearthstone warmth and tapestry hung against stone. If you serve in a manor, with curtains and fur and feather. If you are wealthy, with wool and straw and shared breath. If you are poor, with every small resource gathered into one temporary defense. And as you leave the great hall and step once more toward the village dark, you feel that the story is preparing to turn inward again. Beyond houses and roads and ranks lies the stranger half of winter sleep, the dreams, the sounds, the odd little beliefs that grow in long cold nights. and the eerie patience of the hours before dawn. The village is quieter now. Fires lower, bodies sink deeper. But winter itself is not yet asleep, and neither, for a little while longer, are you. The village is quieter now, and because it is quieter, the mind begins to speak more loudly. That may be the strangest turn in the whole long night. You have learned about beds and blankets, barn heat and monastic discipline, thick broth and wool caps. But winter sleep is not only a matter of body and shelter, it is also a matter of dreams, sounds, beliefs, and the peculiar mood that settles over a community once the fires have lowered and the dark has had time to deepen. You follow a narrow lane toward a cottage where almost no light escapes at all. For a moment you wonder whether everyone inside is already asleep. But when you come near the shutter, you notice the faintest moving glow. A candle, perhaps, shielded carefully from the room. Inside, a teenage girl sits awake on her bed with a blanket drawn up around her shoulders. Frost has begun to feather the inside edges of the shutter frame, and the candle near her knees turns the patterns into pale little branches. She looks as though she has been listening rather than waiting. When you sit beside the bed and ask what keeps her awake, she shrugs in the understated way of someone who has spent many winters accepting strange things without needing to name them fully. She says nights like this make dreams stronger. The cold sharpens them. The dark lengthens them. Sometimes she wakes before dawn, convinced that she has heard voices moving in mist beyond the cottage, or wolves crossing the fields, though there are none near the village, or a river under ice speaking in a language too old to understand. She says it all very calmly, which makes the image more convincing rather than less. The room around her feels suspended. The fire in this house is nearly out. The blankets are thick enough, but the air above them is cold. Every time she speaks, you can see a little of her breath. She reaches beneath her pillow and shows you a small collection of objects. A smooth pebble, a sprig of dried lavender tied with thread, a feather, a little carved bird worn smooth at the tail. Dream things, she calls them. They are not formal charms. Not exactly. Just things she likes to keep near her when the nights grow longest. Her grandmother believed certain objects guided sleep gently, or at least kept bad dreams from becoming too noisy. You turn the carved bird in your hand. It is simple, almost crude, but it has the tenderness of something held many times. The girl says she once dreamed of flying over the village when she slept with it near her cheek. She laughs softly after saying it, perhaps embarrassed, but not enough to retract it. In another season, such a confession might sound childish. In winter, it sounds like part of the weather. Long nights make room for private myth. There is a little booklet beside the bed as well. No grand illuminated manuscript, just scraps of writing kept together. Household notes, little copied prayers, a line or two of remembered interpretation. If you dream of clear water, it may mean news. If you dream of smoke, caution. If you dream of losing a shoe in snow, someone in the house will catch cold. That last one sounds suspiciously like the kind of rule invented by a mother tired of children misplacing important things, and you cannot help smiling. The girl smiles too, because she knows it as well as you do. Even folklore has a practical streak in a village. People in places like this often folded dreams into ordinary life without making a dramatic performance of them. Historians can trace folk beliefs around sleep, omens, and winter visions only in fragments, because much of it lived in speech rather than books. That makes it easy to imagine, because the fragments are exactly what remain after many evenings of quiet repetition. A grandmother saying, "Do not sleep with your feet uncovered on a frost night, or your dreams will wander too far." An uncle insisting that if the wind changes in the middle watch of the night, someone in the village will wake, speaking of strange things by morning. Not doctrine, not madness, just winter talk, shaped by darkness and passed carefully between people who had long hours in which to listen. You step back out into the lane, and the cold receives you again. But now the village feels different. Less like a place of sleeping bodies, and more like a place of listening minds. The farther the night goes, the more every sound gains importance. A fence shifting, a shutter clicking, a dog stirring in straw. You stand still for a while and let the village tell you what it sounds like in the hour when most fires are banked. Most children are asleep, and only the cold remains fully awake. The first sound is a roof timber answering frost. A short, sharp pop from somewhere above and to your left. Then another, farther off. Wood contracts in the cold and complains about it. The noise is small, but because the night is otherwise so still, it seems to travel farther than it ought to. Next comes the faint, long creak of a sign outside a closed alehouse, moving just enough in the wind to remind you that weather never entirely stops. There is a soft scrape from a shed where a hen has changed position. A dog barks once, not alarmed, only offended perhaps by some dream of its own. Then silence again. That silence is never empty. I think that is what winter teaches best. Silence is full of waiting. The village lanes hold it. The frozen fields hold it. The river beyond the houses holds it under its skin of ice. If you listen carefully enough, winter begins to sound like something alive but patient, a creature too large to see all at once. You follow the sound of running water, or rather water trying not to run, until you reach a small stream at the edge of the village. Much of it has frozen over, but not all. Dark water moves below the ice in narrow channels, and every so often the ice gives a little brittle note as pressure shifts. It sounds almost like glass touched with a spoon. Then a lower sound beneath it, deeper and stranger, the muted crack of thicker ice adjusting to the current below. If you heard that from bed, half asleep, wrapped in blankets, you might very well decide the earth itself was thinking aloud. An old couple in a nearby cottage have done exactly that for years. They invite you in when they see you pausing by the shutter, and at once you step from cold moonlight into the very last stages of their banked fire. Their room is dim, almost blue at the edges, where frost reflects the small ember glow. They are not yet asleep, only listening. The man says winter has different voices, and if you ignore them, you miss half the season. The woman corrects him and says winter has too many voices, and the trick is learning which ones matter. They begin naming them for you. The deep settling knock from the roof beam when the temperature drops suddenly. The tapping sound of loosened ice at the eaves. The long little moan the doorframe makes in a crosswind. The soft, brittle hiss of blown snow against the outer wall. the sharper crack from the stream when the ice shifts, the heavy rustle from the barn when cattle rise and lie down again. They speak of these things the way townspeople might speak of traffic patterns or church bells. Familiar, legible, useful. The old woman says that when frost creeps too far inside the shutter edges before midnight, morning will come cruel and white. The old man says if the stream cracks twice in quick succession, the next day will stay bitter, even if the sky looks clear. Some of these beliefs no doubt come from long observation, some from repetition polished into certainty. We cannot always separate weather knowledge from folklore in a room like this, nor should we try too hard. The mixture is part of the point. Experience and imagination sleep in the same bed here. The man leans closer and tells you that the worst winter sounds are not the loud ones, but the nearly gentle ones. The little shifting sigh from a wall that has opened a new gap to the outside. The almost polite tick from the last coal collapsing under ash. The muffled cough from a child in the next room just as the air turns colder. Those are the sounds that keep a sensible person from sleeping too deeply. He says it with a smile, though not a cheerful one. More the smile of a man who knows the night too well to resent it entirely. When you step outside again, the sky has taken on that deeper hour quality, not yet pre-dawn, but moving toward it. Frost glints on the lane like ground glass. The roofs of the cottages seem to have lowered themselves under their white burden. And now the village soundscape grows richer because you have learned how to hear it. The distant stream, a fence wire, or rather its medieval equivalent, some loose fastening somewhere, trembling in the wind, goats shifting in straw, a shutter pushed, then released, the brief patter of snow slipping from a roof edge, the almost comic little indignation of a chicken disturbed on its perch. Even humor lives differently at this hour, softer, but perhaps more necessary. You come to another cottage where a child has woken from a dream and crawled into the blanket fold between mother and father. No one is fully awake, but no one is fully asleep either. That is another truth of pre-dawn winter rest. It is broken, adjusted, layered with small wakings and returns. The mother smooths the child's hair without opening her eyes. The father shifts to make room. A dog at the foot of the bed resettles with a deep sigh that sounds almost theatrical. The whole room seems to exhale together and sink again. The source script lingers on this world of half-sleep and inner life for good reason. Once the practical work of winter survival has been done, what remains are the hours in which the mind makes weather of its own. Strange dreams, the pressure of silence, the habit of listening for shifts in the house, the low, ongoing negotiation between fear and familiarity. Nothing in it is grand. That is what makes it true. You move on and find yourself beneath a roof edge where a line of icicles has formed. One falls suddenly, breaks against the ground with a delicate hard note, and startles you more than it should. That, too, belongs to winter listening. The season teaches you to overestimate small sounds, because small sounds sometimes matter. A crack in the roof, a coal gone dead, a child too quiet, an animal in distress, a shutter broken free. Sound becomes watchfulness. There is a strange comfort in that watchfulness. You know that feeling when a place is so quiet that it seems to draw your own thoughts out more clearly. This village is like that now. The long dark has polished everything down to essentials. Heat, breath, wood, frost, dream, sound. What remains is a kind of intimacy between people and their surroundings that modern life often smothers under constant noise. At the far end of the lane, near the fields, the wind moves through dry hedges with a whispering friction that almost resembles speech. For one absurd moment, you think of the girl's comment about voices in the mist and understand completely how such stories survive. Not because people are foolish, but because winter produces so many almost voices, almost footsteps, almost signs, that imagination steps in to finish the sentence. You return at last toward the center of the village. Most homes are fully quiet now. The great hall is distant behind its thicker walls. The monastery's bell has long since faded. The inn glows faintly at the road. Here among the cottages, the sounds have narrowed to what matters most. Sleeping breath, settling wood, low animal movements, the stream under ice, the occasional remark of frost itself. And that is where this part of the journey gently settles. Medieval people did not merely survive winter nights in a physical sense. They inhabited them mentally. They dreamed inside them, listened inside them, named them, joked about them, feared them a little, interpreted them. The cold sharpened not only the air, but the imagination. A long winter night was never just a gap between 2 days. It was its own country, full of whispers, signs, memories, and little private meanings carried beneath blankets until morning. You pause once more outside the cottage of the dreaming girl. The candle inside has finally gone out. Frost still feathers the shutter. Somewhere nearby, a beam speaks softly to the cold. The village lies wrapped in dark, listening to itself. And as the first hint of the deepest hour begins to gather, the story turns toward its hardest, final lesson. What happens when the routines fail? When the fire does not hold? When winter strips away all but the most fragile forms of warmth and asks, who can endure until dawn? The hardest lesson waits in a cottage with no smoke rising from the roof. You notice that before anything else, every other home in the lane gives some sign of life. A faint line of warmth, a breathing chimney, a little pulse of ember behind a shutter. This one sits under frost with a stillness that is too complete. You cross the yard with the uneasy care of someone approaching bad news. And when you press open the door, the answer is immediate. The fire is dead. Not low. Not banked. Dead. The hearth holds only gray ash and the dark, blunt shapes of exhausted wood. No red glow beneath. No little surviving memory of warmth. The room is colder than any house you have entered tonight. Your breath shows at once. The inside of the shutters is filmed with a white edge of ice. Even the air seems thinner, as if the room has been scraped clean of heat. And yet the family is still here, alive, folded together under layers of blanket and wool at the warmest corner they can make for themselves. The father sits upright against the wall, not asleep, only enduring. The mother has drawn both children close beneath cloaks, shawls, quilts, whatever could be gathered. A dog is wedged at their feet. No one moves quickly. In a room this cold, quick movement wastes warmth. The mother tells you in a voice almost too calm that the coals went out earlier than they should have. Perhaps the ash was laid too heavily. Perhaps the fuel was poorer than usual. Perhaps the night simply bit harder than expected. There is no accusation in her voice. Medieval winter had no interest in fairness. Sometimes you did everything correctly and still lost the fire. This, then, is the narrow edge on which so much winter sleep balanced. All the strategies you have seen, the banking of embers, the patched walls, the thick pottage, the wool, the straw, all of them existed because of moments like this one. Because a dead hearth turned a house from shelter into test. The father reaches beneath the blankets and shows you how they have answered the failure. More layers. Every spare cloak. Every old shawl. Straw pushed against the lower edge of the shutters. A rolled rug pressed at the door. The children are in the middle. Adults on the outside. The dog at the foot where heat is most likely to leak. They have made themselves into a living knot, tight enough that their shared warmth has some chance of holding until first light. It is not comfortable. Nothing about this room suggests comfort now. But there is still intelligence here. The mother has wrapped the children's heads. Their hands are tucked beneath opposing armpits. Their legs are folded inward. She has laid an extra blanket under them as well as above, because cold rises from the floor as insistently as it enters from the wall. Every choice matters. One child wakes enough to murmur that his nose hurts from the cold. The mother rubs it gently through the blanket edge until he settles again. The father says they considered going to the barn, but the wind outside was too sharp, and the little one had already begun to shiver. Better to lose the room and keep the cluster. It is a brutal calculation, but a clear one. This is what winter turns people into. Not cruel, but precise. You stand near the dead hearth and look down at the ash. It is such an ordinary sight, and under other conditions it would barely deserve notice. Tonight it feels almost tragic. All evening the story has circled around small managed warmth. Here is the opposite. The point where management failed. The line between endurance and danger drawn in gray powder. Still, the room is not without hope. Human bodies really are furnaces, as the source script wisely says. Imperfect furnaces. Slow, vulnerably, but real. You kneel near the family and feel the trapped warmth rising faintly from the mass of blankets. It is not much. Yet in a house this cold, not much becomes everything. The father smiles tiredly and says that winter teaches you how grateful to be for ridiculous things. A warm dog, an old blanket that still holds, a child too sleepy to complain properly, a wife who remembers to stuff the shutter cracks with spare wool. It is a grim little joke, but it lands softly in the room. The mother huffs a laugh and says he forgot the most important thing. Dawn, provided it has the decency to arrive. That dry humor matters. It is another kind of warmth, I think. The kind that keeps fear from taking the whole room. You have heard it all night, tucked into remarks about goats stealing heat. nightcaps keeping spirits from nibbling thoughts, peas sticking to ribs, servants losing warm places to hounds. Medieval winter could be harsh enough to crush people if it was allowed to become the only voice. Humor made sure it was not. The family waits. That may be the most difficult action of all. There is no more work to do now. No fire to coax. No more cloth to tuck. The blankets are as tight as they can be. The bodies are as close as they can get. The rest is patience, breath, endurance, listening. And because there is little else to occupy the mind, the room begins to fill with sound again. The coldest sounds of the night. A beam contracts with a sharp report from above. Frost crackles faintly at the shutter edge. Somewhere outside, the stream gives a low broken note under its skin of ice. The dog sighs in sleep. The youngest child's breathing goes shallow, then deep, then steady again. All of it seems amplified by the absence of fire. A living hearth softens a room. A dead hearth leaves the room exposed. You settle near them for a while, wrapped in whatever spare wool can be found, and the minutes slow almost to stillness. This is where medieval winter sleep becomes something larger than sleep. It becomes watchfulness carried inside rest. No one here is fully awake, but no one is wholly surrendered either. The father listens between breaths. The mother adjusts a blanket edge without opening her eyes. Even the dog seems to know this is not a night for sprawling confidence. At last, so slowly you almost mistrust it, the dark begins to change. It is not sunrise yet, not even close. But the black at the shutter edges loosens into a denser gray. The room itself remains bitterly cold. If anything, pre-dawn often feels colder than midnight, because every bit of stored warmth has had time to fade. And yet something inside the family shifts. Not relief exactly, more like orientation. The night is no longer endless. It has direction now. The first sound of approaching morning comes from the roof. A long, soft crackle as frost begins to wake on the thatch and timbers. Then another from farther away. Across the village, roofs are beginning to speak. The stream follows, a firmer break under ice. Then the quick, delicate patter of something frozen slipping from an eave and shattering below. A cock calls once, uncertain whether the light has yet earned him. Another answers more confidently. The dog at the family's feet lifts its head and blinks toward the shutter. The mother finally uncovers her face and inhales the sharp morning cold. It is still vicious, but the fact of daylight transforms it. Night cold is one thing. Day cold is another. Day cold can be worked against. Fires can be rebuilt. Water can be carried. Animals fed. Neighbors visited. A dead hearth in darkness is dread. A dead hearth at dawn is a task. Outside, the village begins to stir in tiny increments. A door opens and closes quickly. Somewhere, someone coughs in the yard. A bucket strikes wood. The inn chimney thickens. A monk's bell sounds from the edge of the settlement. The great hall's smoke rises more confidently. The whole place seems to emerge from under the night, one careful breath at a time. The father in the cold cottage untangles himself from the blankets with obvious reluctance. and goes to the hearth. He kneels before the ash and stirs it, not because he expects miracle coals now, but because habit demands one last check. Nothing. Only the pale, dead crumble of what warmed them yesterday. He nods once, accepts it, and reaches for flint. Morning begins there. In effort, the children remain cocooned, while the mother rubs their hands through the covers to bring warmth back into stiff fingers. She tells them dawn has arrived, and one of them, still half asleep, asks if dawn brought the fire with it. She smiles and says, no, but it brought a chance. That may be the most medieval sentence in the whole story. You step back outside so you can see the village as a whole receiving morning. Frost lies over roofs, fences, paths, carts, even the little troughs outside the barns. Smoke begins to rise in more places now, thin at first, then thicker as fires are coaxed back to life. Cows sound from the barns. Dogs shake themselves awake. Hens begin their practical complaints. The stream still cracks now and then beneath its ice, but the sound belongs to daylight now, and daylight makes almost everything easier to bear. The source script began by asking how people slept through the coldest winters in medieval England without heating. The answer, after this long, slow journey, is both simple and immense. They did not rely on one thing. They relied on many small things joined together. Fire, when it lasted. Banked embers. Straw mattresses. Wool blankets. Linen underlayers. Nightcaps. Herbs. Thick suppers. Warm broth. Shared rooms. Shared breath. Bed curtains. Sleeping niches. Tapestries. Barn warmth. Heated stones. Monastic discipline. Manor fires. Inn hospitality. Folk wisdom. Repairs at the wall. Humor in the dark. A dog's body at the foot of the bed. A child's dream charm under the pillow. Everything mattered. That may be the most moving part of it. Medieval winter survival was made not from grand inventions, but from 1,000 modest acts performed faithfully. Someone mending a sleeve. Someone saving the better blanket for the child. Someone pressing moss into a crack. Someone stirring fat into pottage. Someone waking just enough to pull a covering back over a sleeping shoulder. The village survives not because winter is gentle, but because people are attentive. You walk slowly now through the lanes as the sky lightens from iron gray to pale silver. The houses look different in daylight, more ordinary perhaps, less mysterious, yet knowing what they held through the night. Weak fires, clustered sleepers, frost at the shutters, hidden endurance, makes them seem almost noble. Even the poorest cottage has contained a whole art of survival. Near the edge of the settlement, the dreaming girl's shutter opens a fraction. At the inn, someone empties old straw from a platform and brings fresh in. At the monastery, the chant has ended and work has begun. In the manor, servants stir embers back into life. In the barn, animals steam gently in the morning air. In the cottage with the dead fire, the first new sparks finally take to tinder, small and miraculous as stars beginning again in ash. You stop and watch that little flame for a moment, through the half-open door. It is such a slight thing, fragile and ordinary. Yet after a night like this, it seems to contain all the stubbornness of the village. Fire returning. Warmth beginning again. Sleep behind them. Another day ahead. Another night eventually to come. The cycle is harsh, but not hopeless. Perhaps that is what the whole winter world has been trying to tell you. The roofs continue their soft crackling as the frost loosens. The stream keeps speaking under its ice. Smoke lifts. Doors open. Bodies move. The village has passed one more night. Not elegantly, not easily, but together, and as the pale morning settles over medieval England, and the cold begins its slow retreat from the deepest hours, you carry with you the hush of banked hearths, the smell of wool and straw, the warmth of pottage and shared blankets, the little jokes told against the dark, the half-believed dreams, the listening roofs, the living barns, and the stubborn truth that sleep in such a world was never passive. It was work. It was craft. It was faith in many small things. It was the refusal to let winter have the final word. Good night.